What do Falcons do? We rise up. Welcome to Rise Up Reactions, a show where we talk all things Falcons, NFL, Georgia sports, and in general, the sports news of the day. I'm your host, Dr. Lee Denning, the Golden Hard Dog, and a lifelong sports fan. Coming back to you guys. It's been a little bit of a break. Been trying to kind of take this off season to really determine if I want to continue making videos or not. Certainly, I am on the smaller end of the Falcons YouTube community. There are some channels that are growing much more rapidly than I am. Which is perfectly fine, and I tend to watch those guys, and I like a lot of them. Aaron Freeman, the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I think it's Atlanta Sports News Daily. I forget the other one. There's one that's getting popular though. But anyways, we got to talk a little bit about our free agency because it seems like we are winding down in free agency. There's not a lot of money left. We're in kind of the third or fourth wave of free agency at this point in time, so there's not a lot of moves to be had at this point in time from free agency, and we're looking more towards the draft. Now, the biggest move that everybody is still waiting on for the Falcons is Kirk Cousins. There have been some rumors, and not even necessarily rumors, some very obvious potential sightings for Kirk Cousins in the Cleveland, Ohio area, which is the only team at this moment in time that is very, very uncertain about who their starting quarterback on day one is going to be. Now, Cleveland has a high draft pick. They could end up taking a quarterback. And I think Kirk is holding out very much like everybody else says, holding on to his no-trade clause because he's like, well, I don't want to go to a situation where the exact same thing is going to happen to me with a young quarterback, and I want to know that I'm their guy for at least a couple of years. Falcons are going to have to pay him a lot of money. We played chicken with that $10 million signing bonus or roster bonus. We lost that one, so we're going to eat $10 million no matter what. But ideally, we would be able to trade, probably not before this year's draft. It's looking like that's not going to happen. I would be surprised if we did trade him before this year, before we got to the draft this year, which is only a few weeks away at this point. But I do believe strongly that he will get traded, probably to the Cleveland Browns, for maybe a 6th or 5th round pick that's a conditional that could go up to like 1 round better depending on how much he plays or success, touchdowns, something of that nature. But Cleveland makes the most sense. He's been in that area, probably visiting backdoor with the owners in some way. Probably not even owners, but definitely potentially going to their medical facilities and getting checked out. It's not against the tampering rules for the league to go and get evaluated by a doctor of your choice anywhere, whether that doctor is affiliated with a team or not. The area that he was found in just coincidentally happens to be all within a mile of the team doctor for the Cleveland Browns. So there's a lot of speculation that that's what's happening there. But anyways, that's the elephant in the room. Kirk Cousins is probably not going to be a Falcon to start the season, but we're just waiting, and we're probably not going to get any draft potential off of him this year. That's probably going to be something that we get a 2026 or 2027 compensation for if we're looking down the line. The Falcons have made moves to end up with about $11.5 million left now for roster space for the top 51. So we've made some moves that were kind of necessary here. As far as departures, I'm just kind of going to go through this real quick. Guys that we've lost. Rondale Moore never suited up for us. He hurt his knee, never suited up. He's gone to the Vikings. We lost Drew Dahlman. That's probably the most devastating loss in my mind because it was a young guy. It was a center. He was the core of our offensive line, or he was part of the core of our offensive line. We built him up over 4 years. He was a former 4th round pick, and I hate to see him go, especially for $14.5 million. I feel like we could have found a way to pay that, though I'm certain they are looking at upcoming contracts, such as Drake London is going to need a new deal. You're going to have to pay Bijan in a couple of years. You're going to have to start thinking about what you're going to do with Michael Penix when he gets to that point in a few years down the line. So you've got to start thinking long term for the Falcons here. But we also, so I hate to lose him, but again, is Newsel going to be a decent starter? Probably. Is he anywhere near what Dahlman was in the run game? No. And you're certainly trying to be a more run-first identity with Bijan Robinson lining up for you in the backfield. So that's going to hurt us. We'll see if we end up drafting somebody in maybe the 4th round here to replace center, but it's not looking like a good year for a center replacement draft. Lost Lorenzo Carter, Matthew Judon, James Smith-Williams on the edge. Carter, as far as I'm concerned, washed. Matthew Judon, he played well early, but he looked slow. He had some key plays throughout the year, but looked slow, was not worth the third-round pick we paid for him. I'm fine letting him walk. James Smith-Williams was some consistency, some not consistency. He was a little bit in and out. Not a huge player for us. We lost Eddie Goldman. I never really wanted Eddie Goldman on our team in the first place. He didn't seem to be a good addition last year, and he certainly was taking up a roster spot at nose tackle for some other guys, potentially, your Taquan Grahams or your Rucororos, or even Brandon Dorless in there. And then obviously losing Grady Jarrett. That one hurt as well, but I felt like we were either going to lose him or we were going to lose David Onyemata. I'm kind of surprised we lost Jarrett, but he was the larger of the two salaries to potentially lose. I'm not going to lie, losing him, I thought we would lose Onyemata as well and make room for some of the new guys, but I think we just don't have the draft capital to make that move and make that make sense right now. So it makes a little bit more sense that we just got rid of one of them. Also losing Antonio Hamilton and Kevin King. Again, not really big moves. And then the one that I would say is addition by subtraction is losing Richie Grant to the 49ers. Kyle Shanahan, enjoy having him on your team. You will have a liability at the safety position. Losing Justin Simmons also kind of hurt. He was not particularly great, but he wasn't bad either. People were certainly not throwing to him a ton, and when he was out in favor of Richie Grant, it made a huge freaking difference. So, lost some consistency, but I just don't think we had the money to pay him. Now, let's talk about what we brought in a little bit here. We've had a little bit more time. Let's talk real quick about some of the re-signs or restructures. Another way we freed up money, we restructured a deal with Jake Matthews to basically make him a Falcon until the day he retires. We got him for another 2 years, an extension of $45 million, $38 million fully guaranteed. So he's with us for at least another 2 years. He will likely retire as a Falcon. He's been a solid left tackle. Probably top 5 at his best, top 10 at his worst. Starting to get more into that just, good, consistent top 12, top 15 guy. But provided a ton of support at left tackle, though we are moving to a position where we need to be concerned with the right tackle a little bit more with a left-handed quarterback. We have also brought in, re-signed Carter L. Hodge. I think this man needs to get more looks at wide receiver, particularly on the outside, but I think that position is a little bit tough for him to find room right now. But he definitely made some big plays for us last year. Is the reason I would argue that we won, one of the big reasons we won the Tampa Bay overtime game on Thursday Night Football. Definitely a man who is a huge, huge special teams guy. Looking forward to having him another 2 years. $6 million is cheap for him. Bringing on Leonard Floyd, I think he is better than any edge rusher we had last year. He's averaged somewhere around that 10-sack mark for most of his career, but he is in his early 30s now, which is a time we typically start seeing edge rushers decline. Again, is he old? No, not by generational standpoint, but in terms of NFL professional league standpoints, getting into your 30s is starting to get up there in years. So he's a guy that probably is, gonna get. I'd be happy if we got 6.5 sacks out of him. If we can get 8 sacks, I feel like we did a really, really good thing there. I know I kind of jumped around here, but other guys we brought back, Storm Norton, we brought him back, and then we also have re-signed Contavious Street and re-signed Mike Hughes as well. Mike Hughes probably being the most important re-sign that we've done so far, $18 million for 3 years. Pretty cheap deal overall for a corner too, and he was pretty good as our outside corner, though now I wonder what you're going to do with CP3, as he probably would have been just as good of an outside corner as well. He certainly is not a slot nickel corner. So we'll see what we end up doing with CP3 here. Maybe CP3 will be on the outside. We'll try Mike Hughes at nickel linebacker, though that still seems like a lot of money to be paid a nickel linebacker, something that you'd hope to maybe find in the draft. I don't think it necessarily precludes the Falcons from taking a corner early in this year's draft, but I think that it means we're more likely to take an edge rusher. I do think that makes this much more likely, seeing as we have our corner positions with at least 3 starting caliber corners locked down right now. I don't think we end up drafting corner unless there's just an unbelievable deal in that first round. So then let's talk about a few other guys. We brought in Divine Diablo, a guy from the Raiders who has an incredible name. I'm not sure he's got a lot else going for him, but, pretty solid name there. We'll see if he ends up being anything more than a rotational piece at that kind of middle linebacker position. Not sure he's going to make a huge difference, but we need depth at this point. We did lose a couple other guys as well that were not mentioned on this report. I'm not sure why we didn't talk about them, but anyways, we'll move on. Morgan Fox is another guy. We actually brought 2 guys on that are both former Panthers. Morgan Fox was with the Chargers for a couple years. He's been a rotational defensive tackle piece. I don't think he's going to be anything more than a rotational piece for us. Again, we have a pretty busy room for defensive linemen, but it doesn't hurt to have extra guys. We did sign a 2-year $2-year $8.5 million deal, so it will be a guy that you're going to see on the field from time to time. He's had some decent sack production when he's been on the field, but he just didn't start a lot of games in the last 2 seasons with the Chargers. He was a routine starter for the year he was with the Carolina Panthers. Then we're bringing in Jordan Fuller as well, another guy that had some good games with the Carolina Panthers, but I don't think his full potential has been reached. He's a guy that I think is going to be a slight downgrade from what we had last year with Justin Simmons, but an upgrade from Richie Grant. So mix of a wash there, and I think his upside is a little bit under like peak Justin Simmons. So I think he has the upside to be better than Justin Simmons was this past year. Is he going to be? I don't know. We'll see how this defensive coordinator actually does things. But anyways, overall, this free agency really feels like kind of a wash. We didn't have a lot of money to work with. This needed to be a year for restructuring, and it needed to be a year for trying to find cheap deals, cheap contracts, and to be competitive, but probably not win. A lot of people are saying this between us and Tampa Bay, and I do fully agree with that. Tampa Bay, I think, is more or less keeping a lot of their core together. They've kept guys like Chris Godwin, Sterling Shepard. They've gotten Hassan Reddick. They're keeping Levante David. They brought in a few other guys there. I don't think they have lost a ton. Just briefly looking at them. They lost Shaq Barrett, which might be a deal on the edge. Not seeing anything huge here. Losing Ryan Neal, that wasn't a huge deal for him. Jordan Whitehead leaving from safety might be a deal, although he was not particularly good last year. I don't know that they're that much better. They're definitely going to have a weak secondary, so hopefully Michael Penix can pick them off just like Kirk Cousins did. But those are going to be shootout games. They still are keeping their core together, but their core is aging. So at some point, players do fall off a cliff with production. Has not happened with their core yet, but we'll see. This might be the year. If it does happen, this division is wide open. If it doesn't, then Tampa Bay looks to probably be the favorite starting the year. There's a lot of people that think the Falcons will be. I just don't know that we've done enough in free agency, and we don't have the draft capital to really make huge moves. I'll be pleasantly surprised. We really need guys that are going to come in and be day one starters on the edge, on the defensive line. We're going to need that help. So we probably need, at this point, what I'm looking at, we need a linebacker, an edge rusher, and probably some form of secondary backup. Something that can be a rotational component in that secondary. Maybe we'll find a gem in the 4th round like we did with CP3 a few years ago. That's kind of what I'm looking at. And then maybe we look at a developmental center or developmental offensive lineman with some of our 7th round picks. We've got 2 of them. They're basically throwaway picks, but you're hoping that somebody develops, but it's unlikely. And then we're going to be looking to find any undrafted free agent gems, which again, we have found in the past. So we'll see what ends up happening from that standpoint. A move could always be made. I'm still a fan of trying to find a trade partner for Kyle Pitts, though the talk of a Kyle Pitts trade has basically been zero this entire offseason. I'm hopeful that we can maybe find some trade partner for him because I don't think we're going to end up re-signing him. If we're not going to re-sign him, I'd like to get some value out of him. He is, for all intent and purposes, a complete bust as the number 4 overall pick. Whether that is his fault for not being a good enough player or whether that is our fault for not developing him correctly, I don't know that you're going to get a clear answer. It's probably a mix of both. Again, it's very much like in medicine. People come in wanting straight answers from my job a lot of times. But a lot of times there's a lot of different things that can play into your chronic conditions. It's not just one thing that did it. It is a multitude of reasons that have combined together to create the situation that we're in now. So that's from a medical perspective. It really applies to most every aspect of life, and the Falcons roster situation is no different. Thank you for watching, liking, sharing, and subscribing. I'm still working on figuring out if I'm going to do the draft or not. I've had some internet changes at home where now no longer I've been using Hulu TV in the past. That no longer works, nor will Sling TV. I'm probably going to have to bite the bullet and maybe do YouTube TV. I have no idea if they actually have the NFL draft on YouTube TV, though, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of consulting. I would still love to live stream the first round of the draft this year, at least up until the Falcons pick, assuming they don't trade back into oblivion. That would be awful. Just for terms of my sanity, because I do have to get up and go to work the next day no matter what, and they start that thing so stinking late. But again, guys, thank you for watching, liking, sharing, and subscribing, and as always, rise up.